Ruddington Framework Knitters Museum was founded on the basis of educating people of all ages about the personal and working lives of the framework knitters during the 1800s and early 1900s. The museum was founded by a group of trustees and is run and maintained by volunteers with the help of donations. The museum is unique in this country. It was founded in the 1970s by a group of trustees who saved the site from being destroyed as they noticed its significance within local history. The Parker family play a significant role in the history of the site. Samuel Parker was the first to arrive at the site, which was built in 1829. He was then followed by his son William. William's son John was the last member of the Parker family to participate in the running of the site. He and his wife Hannah moved from America to Ruddington, where they extended their family. With the invention of steam and electrical powered machinery, the textile industry was revolutionised in the cities, and manual knitting sites such as this one became defunct. The founders obtained the museum in the 1970s and came across 2 cottages as opposed to the 4 that were originally built, as they had been converted to maximise the space. People were still living within the cottages at this time, and they had been modernised, installing a bathroom and a modern kitchen. Once the cottages were under the ownership of the museum, the Parker cottage and the poorer family's cottage were restored to the near original state. At the time of this restoration, the grandchildren of John and Hannah Parker were contacted, and this has led to a very close representation of what the Parker cottage would have looked like. There are 2 original artefacts from the Parker family: John's writing slope, which sits upon the writing desk under the window, and the Parker family's Bible box. It is also known that the Parker living room contained Hannah's cottage piano and a grandfather clock. Both pieces are represented here, but are not the original artefacts. The dark green builder's finish on the kitchen walls was traditional decor for the time. This kitchen shows the Parker family's wealth and would have not been the norm for most of the knitting families. The master bedroom was where Hannah and John would have slept. Again, none of the artefacts in this room are originals, but they are a very close representation of the objects Hannah and John would have owned. The bed is a feather bed, typical of the Victorian era, with a straw mattress. The room is full of bits and pieces, characteristic of a Victorian room, and the mass of clutter would have been a display of wealth. Things such as button hooks, glove stretchers, cuff links, various pieces of jewellery and grooming instruments would have been common in the bedroom. There are several chamber pots and a wash bowl and jug. These were required due to the lack of an indoor privy and no bathroom. The family would bathe in a tin bath in front of the fire, sharing the water, and so the water bowl would be used to wash in the morning, as bathing was not an everyday activity. The Victorians were keen on recycling and made rag rugs from old clothes rather than throwing them away. The texts on the walls were popular during this era and often included Shakespearean quotes and religious passages from the Bible. The smaller bedroom again contains non-original artefacts, but all the objects in the room would have been typical of the era. The bed is a smaller version of the bed in the master bedroom and also has a straw mattress. The children of the family would have slept in the attic, sharing one bed top to toe. The beams of the attic are another example of Victorian recycling. The site sits on what used to be farmland and the beams were salvaged from an old barn. This kitchen in the poorer family's cottage is very sparse and cold looking compared to the Parker kitchen. The door which leads to the street would have been the only way in and out of the cottage, meaning that the people who lived there would have to go round and through the alleyway to get to work, privy, the wash house and the water pumps. The knitting frame which stands in this kitchen would not have been in the cottage originally. However, people did knit on the frames in their homes, and this was called the cottage industry. The wash house was a shared amenity and was where the mother of the house would wash the family's clothing and also the garments which were being made in the workshops. The clothes and garments would be cleaned in the washing machine using water from the copper boiler. The dolly on a wheel operated the machine. This would spin round and go up and down and was very hard work to operate. The yard was built in the late 1820s, and with the growing knitting community it may have been filled with 100 or so people at a time. There were originally 2 pumps in the yard, one for surface water and one from a deep well. The knitting families would use the cleaner water for washing themselves and cooking, and the surface water for cleaning clothes and around the house. It is thought that the frame workshops were originally smaller, 1-storey buildings, which were later expanded and made into 2 large buildings still standing today. The workshops would have been filled on both floors with stocking frames, originally the narrower frames as invented by William Lee, and then expanding to the wider frames. The newer, wider frames would have replaced the narrower frames in the workshop completely, and so the aisle between the machines in the upstairs workshop would have been considerably narrower. The workshop in which the Griswold circular knitting machines are housed would have originally been filled with the framework knitting machines. This would have looked similar to the framework shop opposite. Although Griswolds were not actually part of the site, the museum feels it is important to represent them as they were a big part of the knitting industry. The machines knit a tube of wool which can be turned into an array of clothing items such as hats, socks and scarves. The chapel was a primitive Methodist church, opened in 1829, which was outgrown in 1873, and a new church was built further down the road. When the Methodists outgrew the chapel, Lucy and Anne Paget, who were local landowners, bought it and gave it to the Anglican Church, who used the chapel for Sunday school. The museum bought the chapel in 1991 and now owns all the important places to the knitters of the time, their homes, their places of work and their church.